Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Wepelis Yopela, and I'm a sales consultant here at NetCB. And on behalf of NetCB and our partner Ativo, I'd like to formally welcome everyone today. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your calendars to make this webinar. We hope that it yields great reward for you guys. And if there's any questions that you have, please feel free to address them in the chat box. Formally, I'd like to welcome my managing director, Mr. Quibus Burgers, as well as Justin Foxcroft, which is our sales director, and then Hendrik de Bruin, which is our security specialist, and then we have Jan de Toit, which is our financial director. And all the way from Dubai, from the Attivo Networks team, we have Ray, who will be conducting the better half of the presentation. He is the VP for Attivo Networks, and he's in charge of the Middle East as well as the African continent. So he's a very well-knowledge guy. And we'd like to please welcome Bahi. He's also with the Ativo team, and he is the Director of Solution Engineering at Ativo. Any questions that you might have, as I said before, please address them in the chat box, or afterwards, after the webinar, we do have a website that you can go on to about in an hour's time. You can go and review the webinar as it's being recorded. So if anything that you missed, anything that you'd like to show the rest of the team that could not make the webinar, feel free to go there. And for future webinars that we might have, just go into the website, take a look at which date suits you best, which conversations we'll be having, and please don't miss out. Invite your friends, your families. Hey, invite your pets even. All right, then. Over to you, Ray.
Sorry. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I just wanted to firstly introduce myself. My name is Hendrik de Bruin. I look after the cybersecurity solutions here at NetCB. And I just have about 3 points that I wanted to touch on just to provide some more context with regards to the Attivo Network solution and where it fits into the cybersecurity landscape. The first point I wanted to make was there's a very incorrect perception in the security industry that if you have a decent firewall and a antivirus on your network and on your workstations, that you are protected. And nothing can really be further from the truth. There's a statement in the security industry, and that's that penetration happens 100% of the time. And what I mean by that is that if an attacker or hacker would like to get into your environment, get access to your data, they will. Because firewalls and antivirus are really not sufficient anymore. What I mean by that is there's a variety of other methods that attackers use to gain access to your infrastructure. Things like phishing emails, perhaps hacking your Wi-Fi, which is actually a trivial job to do, and by means like that, get access to your network. So really the reality is that if an attacker or hacker would like to get access to your information, they will. And specifically through the firewall or by other means. So one way to remedy that is to utilize services such as penetration tests, etc., which is great. The penetration tests will identify various vulnerabilities within your infrastructure, within your firewall, etc. But the reality is it's a point-in-time exercise, and vulnerabilities are discovered on a daily basis. Configuration changes to your systems are made on a daily basis. So even though penetration testing will identify vulnerabilities, because your environment is dynamic, it changes on a daily basis, and it's almost impossible to have a constant penetration test on your environment. The other item that I wanted to mention is that if you look at the services and technologies that's being exploited at the moment, it's all technologies that's supposed to be accessible from the internet. If you look at Exchange, it's the on-premise Exchange web application that's being hacked. The 40OS application, which is firewalls and VPNs, etc. SAP, as an example. And then the latest one that's doing the rumors today is now also Pulse Secure, which is another VPN service. I did some spot checks today just as a matter of interest. And I identified that one of the largest financial organizations in South Africa is currently using Pulse Secure, and it is completely exposed on the internet. In the case of Exchange, I did a check and there's over 1,830 Exchange servers in South Africa that's vulnerable at the moment from hacking, etc. And I believe we've got some audience members from Europe. So I did a quick check there. In Germany, there's over 48,000 Exchange servers that's open for hacking and attacking. My point with all of this is that having a firewall or antivirus on your workstations or at the border, your perimeter of your infrastructure is not sufficient. You need to be able to monitor and control and manage things like lateral movement, privilege escalations, etc. within your environment. And that is the only way that you can truly secure your environment. And that is exactly where Attivo Networks fits into the bigger picture. Thank you very much. And Ray, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Hendrik. Can you hear me well? Is my voice okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Ray.
Good.
Yes, loud and clear. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Hendrik, for the short presentation, short introduction. Just by way of introducing myself, my name is Ray Cafferty, and I manage the Attivo Networks Middle East, Turkey, and Africa operation out of Dubai. We're very glad to have the opportunity with NetCB to present to you the advanced cyber security solutions from Attivo. Today, myself and colleague and one of my colleagues, Bahi Hour, who is already on the panel or on the call today, we will share presenting to you. I will take about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to introduce the company, introduce the market we're in, and introduce some of the dynamics in the cyber threat marketplace that was alluded to regarding the attacks and the dwell time and so forth. And then I will hand it over to Bahi, who will go into some level of details on the technology of Attivo. And if we have enough time at the end of the session, we will probably just go through a very quick demo to show and demonstrate our capabilities to you live from our lab here in Dubai. So just to give you a bit of a background on Attivo. Attivo was started or was founded back in 2011, and we shipped our first customer proven solution back in 2014. So we've been in operation for about 6-7 years, and we have been in the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa since March 2016. And we have a team collectively in the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa of 15 people that are Attivo employees, and they range from commercial sales and also very heavy technical pre and post sales that allows us to provide help and support to all of our customers and partners in the region. The company Tivo was started initially as the pioneer, or it pioneered the idea of cyber deception, introduced the concept and the idea behind deception, and I'll go over it in the next few slides, was it's to give to shift the power from the attacker to the defender. And we will show you today how the exciting advanced solutions from Attivo will give the cyber defender the upper hand in defending the network. So we really pioneered deception, and we will go tell you exactly our Attivo ThreatDefend platform and what type of exciting solutions we can offer out of that platform. And then we have also moved on progressively to add some very interesting features and functionalities to our ThreatDefend platform. So you can say that our deception solution is the backbone and is the cornerstone of what we do. And we have added a very interesting features and functionalities on top of that to be able to allow for identity protection and also make your network through our solution called Endpoint Detection Net that allows your network to act as a trap for any malicious activities that are inside of the network. And we'll go into a lot of details there. And in doing so, we decided that we have to protect and secure the critical assets and the jewels of any organization IT infrastructure. And as you might understand and be aware that the Active Directory is very popular. 90% of global organizations use the Microsoft Active Directory to store their identities, to store their credentials. And this is the first thing that the attacker will target once they manage to bypass the perimeter defense solutions and land inside the network. So we have some very attractive, very robust features within our solutions that allows you to protect your Active Directory. And all of that solutions from Ativo allows the defender of the network to behave and institute active defense measure, not reactive defense measures, but active defense. We don't want to wait till we are hit and then allow the attacker to spend a lot of time inside the network before we track him down. No, the deception will allow you to provide some active defense tools and techniques to allow you to capture the movement of the attacker inside the network as soon as they decide, as soon as they start moving around and start propagating maliciously inside of your network. So Attivo Networks is the expert in preventing and detecting identity privilege escalation and lateral movement. These are the identity privilege escalation and lateral movement are the two predominant attack surface inside the network that we believe none of the traditional prevention solutions and the traditional tools that are available in the market today are able to detect with a high level of accuracy and efficacy. And we believe our solutions that goes across endpoints, Active Directories, and cloud infrastructures will allow complete protection of those high value assets. So company is very international in nature. We have 350 plus customers, and they are 50% of them are part of the Fortune 100, 500 companies around the world. We have a global operations, and we've been nominated as the fastest 500 companies within the Deloitte survey 3 times in a row. And really that is evidence in our ability to execute in the market today. So we have Attivo Networks is a global company with global presence, and we are like I said, we have invented the deception and the concept of active defense deception technology, and we have customers all across verticals. We are not specific on a certain vertical or certain market segment. We cater to all types of solutions, all type of customers around the world. So just alluding to what has been done or has been shown by the previous presenter, Hendrik, he said that if you have a firewall, or if you have an IPS, or if you have an endpoint product, do not really feel that you are safe. It gives you a false sense of security, because there is something called the internal threat detection gap. And what is that? The internal threat detection gap is comprised of one definition in this market called the dwell time. Dwell time is the time that the attacker or the cyber threat or the breach have successfully managed to bypass your traditional defenses or preventive defenses, either on the perimeter of the network or at the endpoint. And they manage through doing social engineering and doing their surveillance of the network to manage to land inside of the network. They have managed to compromise patient zero, and from patient zero, they escalated their privileges, they gathered intelligence inside the network, and they started their campaign inside the network to reach the critical assets or the critical components of your network. And basically, they look for the DMZ zone, they look for Active Directory, they look for, and they start doing lateral movement around to reach their destination. The dwell time currently in this market is quite large because the attacker takes less than 5 hours to infiltrate any network if he has done his or her social engineering in the network. And it takes up to 15 hours to exfiltrate data and reach the target objective of the attack. Whereas it takes roughly around 78 to 90 days nowadays to find that attack inside the network. And therefore, there is a gap. There is a gap between entry in the network and the time that the tools available in the market to be able to alert to that entry in the network. And that gap is called dwell time. And as long as dwell time is big, the attacker is going to have all the way the upper hand in going in and out, achieving their objective without any hindrance or without any challenge. Therefore, deception from Ativo will change the variables of the game. Now the defender is now have the upper hand with deception. The attacker is now on guard of not to do any mistake inside the network, or else they will fall in and trip on the booby trap and the honeypots that were laid inside the network, and therefore he will be or she will be exposed, and all of his tools, tactics, and procedures are recorded, and in a very fake environment that they are not aware that they are in it. So it's really gives the attacker the upper hand in doing so. Just to give you a bit of background about the importance of deception for threat defense, this is a chart that was published by Gartner back in, early in late 2020, that shows all of the emerging technologies and the trends that are they are witnessing in the market today from emerging technologies, basically. And you can see I have highlighted and I have circled where it says deception for threat defense. So Gartner is seeing more and more appetite from chief information security officers and security managers across the world, the need to deploy cyber deception solutions to get the maximum internal threat detection and defense inside of the network. As you can see, the masses are quite large, and therefore I believe this technology is becoming a must-have technology for any SOC or any organization with a huge digital infrastructure that needs to protect its critical assets accordingly. Now, you might also say that people say, well, I have an EDR solution, or I have an EPP solutions, endpoint protection product solution. Why do I need deception or Ativo EDN Endpoint Detection Net solution in addition to what I have. And the reason for what we say is because the EDN solutions from Ativo has specific features that neither the EPP vendor nor the EDR vendor can alert or can witness those malicious movements inside of the network. And therefore, what we're saying is the Endpoint Detection Net security suite from Ativo does not compete with any EDR or any EPP vendor. In the contrary, we're saying that if you combine whatever EDR or whatever EPP vendor you have in your network, and you add to it the element of Ativo EDN with it, then you will have a security defense force multiplier on that endpoint, as if you are fortifying this endpoint with huge advantage by combining Ativo with all the EDR vendors. And I will show you in the next couple of slides some of the tests that was done in MyTide and how the addition of Ativo has increased the detection rate of malicious activities inside the network by a factor of 42%. So Ativo Endpoint Detection Net is 5 different security licenses that allows you to give protection to your existing credentials and privileges inside of the network. It has a big suite, and we'll show you that in the next presentation, about how can you secure your Active Directory without installing anything on the Active Directory. It's a script that sits on your endpoint, and from that endpoint you can protect the Active Directory without imposing any performance load on the Active Directory. We can deflect any unnecessary numeration for unused ports within the network, because usually anybody who is enumerating open ports within the network, that means they are fishing around for some malicious activities, and we can deflect that and redirect them to our honeypot solution, as well as we have ransomware protection, ransomware 2.0 protection that we also will show you in the next presentation. So if you look at the MyTide Coverage, which is the framework that MyTide have established in the industry today, and it shows all of the activities that solutions must have in order to defend the network, all the way from initial compromise, all the way out, all the way to the eventual exfiltration of the data or the eventual damage that is done inside of the network. Luckily, there are a lot of solutions that helps you with preventing the attack from coming in, and there is a lot of solutions that will help you with data leakage prevention from leakage or exfiltrating any data outside of your organization. But there is hardly any solution that sits in between the initial breach or entry into the network, between that and also the exfiltration. And the Ativo core strength within this can help you with preventing credential access, preventing further discovery of the network, preventing malicious lateral movement inside of the network, and collection of credentials and high value privileges. This is what I mentioned to you earlier. There was a test done by MyTide Corporation called the APT29 test, and it says it tested about a dozen EDR EPP vendors, and they measured their efficacy of detection of the actual malicious breach with or without Ativo. And if you see on the far right, where it says with Attivo, you can see the improvement that Attivo has introduced to that specific endpoint vendor by virtue of increasing the detection, sorry, the detection capability of the combined solution of EDR, EPP plus EDM. So the force multiplier is proven within the MyTide framework. And if you look at the Active Directory Assessor solution from Attivo, and we will go into a lot of details with it, it can shows you here that Attivo, which shows in orange, has the highest mark within all of the attack vectors inside the MyTide attack framework, from persistence to privilege escalation to credential access to lateral movement. You can see that Attivo has scored quite high when it comes to recognizing and alerting to those type of attacks inside of the network. So I would stop here and I will allow my colleague Bahi Khour to take over to give you a bit more detailed description about what I just mentioned. So over to you, Mr. Bahi.
Thank you very much, Ray. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
okay, great. So taking over from what you stopped, I think you have highlighted clearly the threat detection gap. What I'm going to do is just go a little bit in more details about the components of the ThreatDefend platform, which is the Attivo solution. That consists of the cyber deception platform, the endpoint detection net, and the active directory protection component. And then end the session with a quick demo, just so you can have a look and feel of how the solution looks like. So basically, just translating what Henrik and Ray just mentioned about changing the game, moving the power in the hands of the defenders. As in most of the breaches that we heard of, the attacker was always, or has been always, one step ahead of the defenders. So with the Attivo cyber deception platform, and as Ray mentioned, we distribute real operating systems decoys in your production VLANs. Those will mimic the production assets and also empower those decoys by injecting the deceptive objects on the real endpoints and real servers. So that will definitely help us to identify the initial attack activities once we have a compromised patient zero. So in case if the attacker tries to do credential harvesting locally, or even query Active Directory for privileged accounts, or does an enumeration to the network services to plan his next lateral movement hop or move or whatever. So what we do, we basically hide the real information, hide the real credentials, and only show deceptive credentials for the attacker to harvest. And once those credentials are harvested, then the target of that net session connection that has been cached on the endpoint will be a decoy system that the attacker has no idea that this is actually a decoy, not a real system, because it has a real IP address from the network, it's running real operating systems, real applications, and mimics the environment and the VLAN that it sits in. So basically, we're making the job of the attacker extremely difficult, and it's almost impossible for the attacker not to make any mistake and touch one of those deceptive objects within the network. So the other point which I want to focus on, which is the endpoint deception, and even before luring or deceiving the attacker to access a decoy system, we believe there are many activities that could be performed by the attacker on patient zero itself at a very early stage of the attack cycle to do a kind of an information gathering or intelligence gathering about the environment before even doing a lateral movement or doing a lateral spread of the ransomware and so on. And in these activities that are on this slide are almost mentioned in every breach report. They're almost there every time that attackers breach a specific network. And unfortunately, as Ray mentioned, the dwell time is really huge. It means that most of our customers who got breached could not detect or being alerted for those activities at patient zero itself. The most common ones are accessing local credentials, especially the LSAS memory credentials. And nowadays, attackers are really actively behind VPN credentials, cloud access keys, as Hendrik mentioned, because everyone is working remotely. And the only way for those attackers to access the critical assets is by acquiring or by stealing the user identities through Active Directory or through identity privilege management and so on. Network discovery is really common. Utilizing the active map share to do a lateral spread over SMB protocol is also very common. And definitely every attacker, in order to reach his final destination, has to explore the lateral movement options and then actively doing lateral movement. Man in the middle to intercept authentication requests and steal user credentials, and privilege escalations using legitimate Active Directory queries like net commands and NL test commands and those things will always allow the attacker from a normal, any normal privilege joined machine to the domain, he will be able to query very sensitive information from the Active Directory. So with the combination of the decoys, the real operating systems decoys, the Active Directory protection component, as well as the Endpoint Detection Net, Attivo was able to form a very comprehensive and scalable ThreatDefend platform that covers user VLANs, data center VLANs, OT and IoT VLANs, as well as the containerized environment, serverless functions, cloud or hybrid cloud, public cloud, private cloud, and Kubernetes environment. So it's really scalable, very comprehensive detection across the environment. This is what Ray mentioned, and I'll go in more details in each one of them. The Endpoint Detection Net, which we believe, and this has been attested and validated by MyTide testing, that Attivo EDN is a real false multiplier for EDR and EPP vendor. It adds a lot of value in the endpoint to detect those advanced attack activities that are performed in every attack, where unfortunately EPP and EDR vendors are not accurately being able to detect them. So we're talking about the deceptive lures, which will give us a clear indication of credential harvesting on the endpoint. Attack service reduction, because any endpoint will have some real credentials cached in LSAS, and those will definitely present a very high risk in lateral movement. So identifying those and eliminating them, cleaning them, and only leave the deceptive options available for the attacker, I think that will make our chances very, very high in order to, in detecting those activities at a very early stage of the attack cycle. Active Directory protections on the endpoint itself, without really installing or touching anything on the domain controllers, being able to hide, always hide the real object from AD. And whenever those are queried, a deceptive object will be delivered to the attacker, and that will lead him to engage with a decoy system. The deflect that Ray just explained to us, any kind of service enumerations, network service enumeration attempts happening in the network, the SOC team or the security team will be alerted, and at a later stage, if that attempt exceeds the threshold that we defined, then we can deflect the traffic of the attacker to a decoy system that will engage and will provide us with all the forensics and the attack artifacts. The ransomware protection that we do is from the critical data side. I mean, the EDR and EPP will always try to detect and prevent the malicious binary or the process to be executed in the endpoint. What we do is we look at it from the data side. We identify or classify what is critical for us and what are the whitelisted applications that should view and should access those files. And then we prevent anyone else from viewing or even accessing those files at all. When it comes to deceptive lures or deceptive credentials, I don't think anybody in the market today can deliver this extensive list of deceptive objects on Windows, on Linux, and Mac, as well as on the cloud access keys that will allow you, if the attacker touches any of those deceptive objects, LSAS, credentials managers, browser cookies, wherever, if he touches those, then you will be alerted at the early stage that somebody is trying to harvest credentials, and then he will be lured to a decoy system for an engagement and a complete threat or adversary intelligence gathering. This attack surface or the threat path, attack surface reduction, it complements the deceptive objects by alerting us on the real exposed credentials that will have or will allow the attacker to do a successful lateral movement to a real critical assets within our environment. By discovering those in real time at the early stage and cleaning them, then the attacker will only be left with deceptive objects that will lead him to decoy systems. The Active Directory attack interception, which we spoke about, and by the way, all of those endpoint features are just a single license and a single light service that runs on the endpoints and complements the functionality of the EPP and EDR. So on the endpoint itself, we will be monitoring the Active Directory LDAP queries and API calls. And if they are originated from an unprivileged VLANs, where the query is trying, for example, to list the domain admins or enterprise admins, Ativo EDN will raise an alert, and the response that contains the real information from AD will be hidden, will be intercepted by EDN. The real objects will be hidden, and deceptive objects will be provided to the attacker before we engage with the decoy system. This is the preventing the endpoint fingerprinting when it comes to endpoint service enumeration. And as a result, we will be able to detect and prevent the east-west lateral movement, which, by the way, every attacker has to do. If the attacker is not able to do a lateral movement within the network, then they won't be able to move out or to break out from patient zero. And normally patient zero will be an unprivileged workstation or a laptop related to a user who received a phishing email or so on. So lateral movement is a key activity that unfortunately have been missed most of the times, because at that time, the attacker will be have done a privilege escalations, and he would have gained real user credentials from the Active Directory. So he will be authenticated, and he will be considered by the other security controls as a legitimate user within the network. That's why lateral movement will always be missed by the security controls. But with Ativo, I think we're covering the early stage of the lateral movement activities, which is credential harvesting and privilege escalations, and the other activities of lateral movement, which is the service enumerations and discovery, and the last stage of the lateral movement, which is the access attempt to the target. And alternatively, the target here, we will do all the configurations to make the target be a decoy system, a real looking, a legitimate decoy system in front of the attacker. And when it comes to ransomware today is completely different than 3-4 years ago. Before, it used to compromise patient zero and then use port 139.445 SMB to do a lateral spread and then encrypt all the files and folders on those systems. Nowadays, it's a little bit more advanced. It's more of a humanly operated or APT-like ransomware attacks after the initial access using phishing email or web vulnerability or brute force attack. Ransomware does the advanced attack activities like the APT attacks, like a privilege escalations, credential harvesting, credential dumping, AD queries, and all the other advanced activities before the lateral movement and the horizontal lateral spread, and then the data encryption and data exfiltration. So hopefully through all the phases of the ransomware attack activities, Ativo is gonna help you in each and every step that the attacker, and hopefully we will not be reaching to the stage where the ransomware is trying to encrypt or exfiltrate data. We will be able to detect and contain that incident at the beginning, once the ransomware is trying just to collect or gather information, gather intelligence about the environment from patient zero itself, after a few seconds or maximum few minutes of the initial compromise, not after days and weeks and 78 days and 90 days, as Verizon's and Mtrend are just publishing in their breach reports. And then once we do an early detection, deceive and lure the attacker to engage with a decoy system, thinking that this is a really critical asset, then attackers tend to reveal themselves. And this is our time to be one step ahead of the attacker, to monitor and gather intelligence about the adversary, understand who is really trying to target us, which process and binary they are using, what's the hash values, what are the queries, what are the compromised users, what are the CNC domains, and so on. And this is really very important information for us, for number one, to elevate our detection capabilities and prevent similar scenarios to happen in the future by enhancing the security controls and updating our firewalls, IPSs, APT solutions, and EDR policies about those activities that we just have seen within the network. Number two, it allows us to do a quick threat hunting, quick search and threat hunting to identify if I have other patient zeros in different VLANs or in different segments of the network that might not be covered initially with the Attivo EDN or with the Attivo Deception. So this kind of attack intelligence, attack artifacts, and forensics are extremely important to make our network more resilient against advanced cyber attacks. And as Ray mentioned, attacks on identities, attacks on Active Directories are becoming more common nowadays. And that's why Attivo has enhanced or complemented their AD Secure, the Active Directory protection component at the endpoint, with something that will do an assessment for your domain controllers. And that will simply apply a continuous checks for any kind of weaknesses, exposures, misconfigurations in your Active Directory, as well as perform a real-time detection of some of the advanced attacks that are where the attacker runs them in a slow fashion that normally security controls won't be able to detect or identify them, like DC shadow attacks, slow password spray attacks, and golden and silver ticket attacks. So those two solutions or those three solutions, and this is what Attivo has done, we have combined anything that is related to Active Directory protection in the Attivo offering, and we packaged it together to form a complete, or I see it personally based on my research, as the most comprehensive Active Directory protection solution in the market as of today. Why? Because some of the solutions cover the endpoint part, some of the solutions cover the domain controller part, and some of the solutions cover maybe the Active Directory queries part. Our solution combining threat path on the endpoint, AD Secure, monitoring the queries, intercepting them, and hiding the real objects, and AD Assessor, performing an assessment on the domain controllers, cover all the kill chain. Wherever the attacker starts from the endpoint, threat path is there to detect and monitors any kind of Active Directory exposures happening on the endpoint. AD Secure monitors the queries between the endpoint and the domain controllers and alert on the unauthorized queries and protect the privileged accounts and the privileged object from being harvested by the attacker. And AD Assessor looking after your domain controllers by assessing the exposures and vulnerabilities, as well as perform live detections of some of the advanced attacks. So this solution can be offered separately from the comprehensive Attivo ThreatDefend platform for those maybe who wanted just to start on the AD and then expand their deception deployment across the network, or you can go ahead and start with the ThreatDefend platform, and that will cover all the Active Directory protection components that you might be looking for. So with that, allow me to stop sharing my presentation and quickly move to the demo part of it. Okay, now I am accessing the lab setup. I hope everyone can see that. So this is the Attivo ThreatDefend platform dashboard, where it provides you high-level information about your deployment, some of the key metrics, how many VLANs are being covered with the deception deployment, how many decoys, how many endpoints installed, and so on. And one of the most important graphs that I always look at is the attack phases. Based on the security events that we have received from the ThreatDefend platform, what are the attack phases that we are looking at? Are they just reconnaissance? Someone is trying to discover something within my network, or have been elevated to an access attempt? It means that the attacker has identified a target and now is trying to access that target via SSH or RDP or HTTPS. And a more advanced one, if the access is using deceptive credentials. It means that I was able to trap the attacker. Why? Because the attacker harvested my deceptive credentials in LSAS and is trying to use them against my decoy systems or even my real servers and real domain controllers. This can also be detected by the attacker. The payload drop is a very advanced stage of the attack where the attacker have successfully accessed one of my decoys and is now dropping a PowerShell script or a Python script or even an exe file on my decoy systems. Decoy data access, these are the decoy tokens. CNC communications, one of my decoys got compromised, and the attacker from the decoy is trying to reach the CNC server to exfiltrate some data or even get more commands from the CNC. And here is about exploitation attempts and man-in-the-middle attempts. Those are translated into attack severities. Those severities are by default set by Attivo, but we allow our customers to set their own severities for a specific type of attack. And to make our security events more understandable and more related to the MITRE ATT&CK TTPs, we do a full MITRE ATT&CK TTP mapping of all of our security events. So we can tell you that those 5 or 10 activities are related to credential access. Those 20 are related to lateral movement. This one is related to privilege escalations. And that will give you an idea on what the attacker is trying to do. And at the bottom, there are some statistics about the top 5 infected machines within your VLANs. So you can go ahead and tag them. Maybe if you receive a lot of events from a specific IP or a specific user, you can tag him as a malicious or a non-malicious. If you see, for example, events coming from one of the C-level computers, you can tag it as VIP. So you can identify whenever there is an event that's been generated from that system, you know what's going on and to which category you can deal with that specific IPs. Let's take a look at how the deception environment looks like. Attivo provides you with a complete network topology, network visibility that will clearly show, for example, every VLAN. For example, this is VLAN 2, this is VLAN 4. The blue color ones are the real systems. We provide you with all the information about them, what are the published services, the operating systems, IP, MAC, first seen, last seen, and so on. And the orange color ones are the decoys that has been deployed by the Attivo ThreatDefend platform. So basically, these are our eyes and ears within the network. Any malicious actor starting from this VLAN, trying to do any man in the middle, any discovery, any service propping, our decoys will definitely, capture it at the early stage of the attack cycle and will report it to the Attivo dashboard. This is the first action. The second action is, as you can see from here, on this real system, there is a small orange triangle. It means this system is deployed or installed with the deceptive lures. So if the attacker, and this is, by the way, I'm just installing it on one system because this is a lab environment, but in the production deployment, this has to go on all the real systems. So because we don't know basically the starting point of the attacker. So wherever the attacker starts harvesting credentials, those credentials, deceptive objects, SMB shares, browser cookies, will point the attacker to one of the decoys, the orange color ones, in the same VLANs, to confirm or to guarantee that we will have an early engagement with that malicious actor. And then the journey will start from there, going to the events, depends on what the attacker activities. It doesn't really, we don't really care. We don't really do the detection based on signature matching or rule matching. Regardless of the attack method, those activities will be detected. Let me start with something related to Active Directory enumerations. Like, for example, this event, it's a high severity event, it's reconnaissance, and this is the attacker IP and the attacker DNS name. It's the service is Active Directory, and it simply says AD privilege group enumeration detected. And if I go deeper within this detection, it provides me with really granular information about the infected system, the compromised user, and what binary or process the attacker has used to query Active Directory for privileged accounts. I can even get the exact command that the attacker run on PowerShell on CMD. The attacker here used net group domain admins. He is trying to list down the domain admins within this environment. I can also capture the SHA-2 hash value, do quick threat hunting to identify if I have the same compromise somewhere else in the network or not. This was a quick Active Directory enumeration attempts. There are other activities that could be detected. For example, let me take an example of file and directory enumerations. So this specific activity has been detected by our EDN. The attacker at that time probably was a ransomware or whatever, was trying to access files and folders using a command line, not using any of the user interface applications that we know. So immediately our ransomware feature picked that up and prevented the attacker from viewing those files and folders. And even we can go deeper to the attack and provide him access to some files and folders, decoy files and folders that are sitting on decoy systems. One of the most common techniques also, the use of credential harvesting. Here we can see that we detected multiple activities from this attacker. It says deceptive credential use, and this is the MITRE attack tactic, and this is the session activity details. The attacker harvested one of the endpoint. He got the deceptive accounts Nick Fury on and tried to use SSH to access my Ubuntu 12.4 decoy access. And once I provided him with the access, look at the commands that he was trying to perform. He was trying to create a directory called hack and then list down the files and then identify the network interfaces and run a PowerShell script and so on. So we can have a complete net session activity details and provide you with full analysis on the attack activities and TTPs. Here is an example about a payload drop. I can immediately detect that, and an auto forensic service will start on the decoy system to provide us with the full information. In every Ativo detected event, I can show you the full details that I was able to get from the attacker related to information gathering, access, reconnaissance, payload, and whatever. And those can be exported in sticks, IUC, CSV, and a packet capture format for threat intel and threat sharing activities. The last point I would like to show as part of this demo is the integration capabilities and the playbooks that we can offer. By creating a playbook, I could send information or send requests to other integrated partners. For example, my Palo Alto firewall, I can tell Palo Alto that this is a compromised system where I have seen credential harvesting or malicious AD queries. So I'll send that IP to Palo Alto to block the IP communication and contain that information. I could do some information sharing with the SIM solution. I can do some endpoint forensics or endpoint blocking using one of my integrated endpoint partners. With that, I would like to thank you very much. It was a quick demo, but I wanted just to give you how the solution looked like and how easy to navigate through the interface and the different events. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Boy. I appreciate that. Yeah, last things from my side. There was a question with regards to whether a attacker will be able to determine or realize that he's actually, in a honeypot or decoy environment, and the answer to that is no. All of those decoys that Bai showed in the presentation, all of those decoys are customized, so you can change things like the names, the operating system. If your organization standardizes on something like SUSE Linux or Red Hat, you can create those decoys to reflect your environment. You can even mimic some of the credentials, etc., to also reflect your environment. So while the attacker is busy enumerating services, etc., within this honeypot or within the on the decoy, he will never be made aware of the fact that it's not actually a production server. That was the one question that came through. The other item I wanted to mention, I think it's very clear from Bai's demonstration also how Attivo Networks also complement additional technologies such as SIEM, etc. If you look at something like Splunk or Elastic, where you can feed the information from Attivo into those solutions. And by doing that, you can reduce the things like alert fatigue that a lot of cybersecurity defenders are struggling with at the moment. Because the information that you get from Attivo is accurate, it's well-defined, etc. So when you get an alert from Attivo that it is a potential threat and you can act accordingly. So I just wanted to mention that. Yes, thank you very much. Boipelo, I'll hand over to you to close off.
Thanks a lot, Hendrik. Thanks a lot, Hendrik. I just wanted to double check. Are there any further questions that anyone has? You're welcome to pop them into the Q&A field or even email us afterwards. And yeah, thanks everyone. Boipelo?
Yes, so thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And like they said, if there's anything that you misunderstood or anything that you'd like a bit more clarity on, please feel free to email us, go to our website, also go to our social media pages for upcoming events. Keep yourself updated. I promise you this will definitely give a great reward to yourself and your team. Once again, my name is Boipelo Siopela from NetCB. Thank you for having us. Bye.
Oh, sorry, just to add, lastly, we will obviously be in contact with all of you by email or telephone afterwards, just to find out if there's anything more that you would like to get from this. And also the recording of this webinar will be available within approximately 24 hours on our website. That's netcb.com, and you could just click on the events tab at the top.
Exactly. All right.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.